Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome, or good afternoon, I guess, for some people. My name is Tracy Rogers, and I'm the manager of our community. I'm really excited to host our fourth developer office hours. Today we have Aruna Balasubramanian and Kitty Chou, and they're going to talk about server deployment and IT administration. So they're both the PMs for those teams. And so I'm going to kick it off over to them, but just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, if you have any questions, you can ask it either on the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and click on that, and myself and Michelle, who's in the room over in our other office, will be monitoring those, making sure that all of those questions get answered. You can also alternatively ask a question in the chat. Just make sure that it's set so that everyone can see it, and we'll monitor there as well. And I think that that's everything. We'll be sure to record this and post it to the community thread after the event is over. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Aruna and Kitty. Seems like you're on mute. Just a second here. Okay, you guys should be good to go.
All right, thank you, Tracy. We want to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We are very, very excited that we are here today, and we're happy to see the engagement that's been in the community for the past week, especially on server administration. We are very grateful for all the responses and the feedback so far, and we're looking forward to the conversation today. I also want to thank Tracy as well as Michelle DiCoro, who's co-helping us with this program. This is a pilot, and I think it's been very successful so far, so we are thankful for this opportunity to engage with all our customers. So with that, we'll quickly go over what we want to do today. So we've done introductions. We want to go over some of the topics we want to cover today with all of you. And then Kitty is going to walk us through what the team has shipped for the past year in terms of features. And if you have questions, that'd be a good point to also ask. And then finally, we have a few pre-release programs going on, alphas and betas, that you can also join if you haven't already. So we'll talk briefly about that as well. So, all right, so here's the topics we want to cover on the top. I'm not going to read through all of them. Our team is focused mostly on backend services. So we do installs and backups and high availability, security. Those kinds of backend services is what we focus on. We saw a lot of great questions also on data source connections as well as permissions. While we may not be able to answer them, if those questions do come up, we'll make sure to follow up with other PMs that own that area. And then, as always, feel free. We are always happy to hear feedback, any questions you may have. So thank you again for joining us today, and we're looking forward to the conversation. Over to Kitty for the next one.
Hi, I'm Kitty, and Aruna and I work together on the Tableau Server pieces that she just mentioned. And so I just wanted to give like a quick overview of some of the features that we shipped over the last year, kind of in 10.0, 10.1, and 10.2. And I'm not going to read through the whole list here, but just call out a few. So in 10.0, for example, we shipped Site SAML, which was a very big request from customers, as well as a number of enhanced admin views. So definitely go check those out. In 10.1, we introduced the ability to do an automated install or silent install of Tableau Server. And I know there are a lot of server admins that were waiting for that feature as well. And then 10.2, we shipped a number of additional improvements in the server as well. Actually, one of the things we want to do is take a quick poll to see what version some of the participants are actually using. We're kind of curious about that. So if you can just answer the poll question that's up on your screen. Cool. Oh, wow. Looks like a good number of you are on 10.1, which is pretty new version. So hopefully you've actually seen some of the features that I talked about, but if not, definitely feel free to ask us about them later in the Q&A portion. And then we also had just one other quick poll question kind of about what platform folks are running on, whether it's like physical hardware, in the cloud, or on virtual software. So if you could answer this question as well, just so we can get a sense of like who are the folks that are in the call today. Awesome. Well, thanks for completing those polls. We just kind of thought that would be fun to collect some data and get a sense of who is joining us today. And so the last thing that I wanted just to share is we do have 2 pre-release alpha programs available right now. One is Tableau Server on Linux, and one is the Windows Tableau Services Manager program, which is our new administration infrastructure for how you would administer Tableau Server. You can visit the link that we have posted here to sign up and get access to that. And we would love your feedback if you're interested. With that, I'm actually going to just open it up to questions.
Perfect. So just to kick things off, we have one question. We've got someone asking about use cases for sites. When is a good time to use sites? What are some scenarios where you have seen people misuse sites? Thanks.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that one. Sites they were created to kind of be able to support multi-tenancy. And really the notion of a site is that the data and the users and everything are isolated to that site. And so it works best if they are kind of isolated tenants or isolated groups that you don't expect to share data sources, or you don't expect to share content across. It isn't a great use for just like organizing content. In terms of if you're just looking to organize content, we generally suggest that users just kind of organize them in projects and things like that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great. Then we have another question about no downtime upgrading. It's kind of a brief question, but do we have built-in no downtime upgrading?
That's a great feature request. It is something that we've been thinking about, but it's not currently supported in our product. There's a number of things that we're doing to that will lead to being able to do that, and so kind of look for more stuff coming out in the next year.
In 10.0, I'd just like to mention in 10.0, we made some progress towards reducing the downtime between grades. And there's a number of features that were added to, one, have a way to not back up or during uninstall, right? And there's a way now where you can also script that as part of your install or upgrade. So those are things that we've done to reduce the downtime, but absolutely, we are a little away from having zero downtime.
Great. We've got a couple of other questions that came in. First is, how do we provide security to the business user?
We actually have an expert on that, Chris Wilkins. Chris, you want to take this one?
We'll pause a moment. I think Tracy needs to unmute herself.
Okay, I'm here with Chris.
Hi, I can speak to this a little bit. Part of the problem, though, is what do you mean by security? My suspicion is that you mean controlling access to content, controlling access to data, and so we have a whole permissions model for that. We have attempted through admin interfaces to make it clear who is able to see what. There are other interpretations of security, but there's many of them, so I'm not sure what to speak to.
Okay, so if you want to add some clarification, we'll go ahead and try to work on an answer for your question. In the meantime, let's move to another question. Can we take backup without downtime? Hot backup doesn't always back up all content. We have experience with version 9. A question from the audience.
So the capability to take a backup without taking downtime is supported. That's called a live backup. You should just be able to run the tabadmin backup command, and it will take a snapshot of the database and the data extracts and data files that are associated with the snapshot of the database that we took in time. But there's always a chance the backup does take, depending on the size of your deployment, anywhere from maybe a few minutes to several hours to run. So depending on how big of a deployment, how much data you have, there could be additional publishes and data that happen as you're taking a backup that won't be stored in that backup. So that could be the reason why you're seeing not all the data in the backup file that you're taking while the server is running.
And then we have a question about authentication using LDAP. Is this in scope for future releases for use instead of Active Directory?
Erwin, you want to take this one?
Sure, yes. LDAP we are adding with Linux and TSM, which are both in alpha now, and you can actually test LDAP today if you're part of those alpha programs. And if again you're not, there's an easy way to sign up by going to tableau.com/getbeta. So we are moving to support generic LDAP. It's in alpha. We've tested against OpenLDAP, AD, and a few other providers. But we'd love to have more feedback. So if you're interested, please get in touch with us.
Or even if you have an LDAP provider you're using that's different from what Owen's mentioned, we'd love that feedback on what you're using today.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, we've got another question. Can automatic backup be scheduled? If so, could you explain how? Thanks.
Sorry.
Can backups be scheduled?
Can automatic backups be scheduled? If so, how? Could you explain? Thanks.
So we don't support, scheduling the backups directly in the product itself, but because we have the command line options, so, running the tabadmin command, you should be able to script taking a backup and scheduling that task, either through like Windows Task Scheduler or, any kind of scheduling tool.
Will you have more features for reporting about what happens or breaks in views? In case there's an error on the client side, Tableau support says network, nothing is in Tableau server logs. Will I be able to plug in New Relic?
We do have a New Relic monitoring connector for Tableau Server. I don't have the information offhand, but one of the things I can do is follow up and post the link to the community thread on how you can get that set up. And, we are always looking to just continue to add and enhance the monitoring tools that we provide for Tableau Server. So if you have specific feedback on scenarios you want to see there, definitely, post those or add those to the chat. Definitely take that as feedback as we plan out our features for the future.
Okay, great. And then back to LDAP, we have a question that came in. Can groups be an LDAP also?
Not sure exactly what you mean by that. I can say that our LDAP support will be equivalent to our AD support today. So you'll be able to import users, import groups, check authentication, sync automatically to your LDAP server. Anything you can do with Active Directory today, you'll be able to do with LDAP when we launch. And again, you can try that out today. We are also, as part of that, including the ability for you to customize how we map to your LDAP system. So there's certain properties we need, such as usernames, emails, things like that. And we know depending on your LDAP implementation, those properties may be called different things. So you'll have a lot of control over how we integrate, how we map certain fields. And then again, the functionality will be equal to what it is for Active Directory, syncing of users and groups, importing, checking authentication.
Okay, great. Then we have another question. I've read in an article about Tableau server sizing and review tools. Where can I find out about this tool? Is it something that is internal software used only by Tableau?
Sure. So we have a few different options. There's certainly some white papers available on our website that discuss how Tableau scales in different scenarios. That's the first place I'd point you. A lot of that really depends on how you use your Tableau server. For example, if you are heavy into using extracts versus heavy into using live connections, that presents a different way we might suggest scaling or configuring your machines. And then on usage patterns, complexity of business, there are a lot of things to take into that. So there are some white papers available online on tableau.com that you can search for that specifically discuss how server scale and how to plan a deployment. We do have several tools available that once you have a deployment for looking at your deployment, things like Tabjolt and Tabmon for monitoring and doing load testing, Scout and Auditor that look and analyze what workbooks and data sources you have and how those are performing. Those are more after the fact of I've got a server up and running, now let me analyze it, see how it's doing, and see where I might need to make some changes. But the white paper is the first place I would point you at. There's also some previous Tableau conference talks that are probably posted online at this point. We could probably follow up with some links that also kind of go over what the same content those papers go over. So I'd start with that. Look for those. If you just search for scalability, you should be able to find them pretty easily.
I'd like to add that this is quite a frequent question that comes up. And so this is also one way that we are informing our future talks at TC. So we'll definitely have a session on sizing and capacity planning in the next TC. So look out for that as well.
So then we have a couple of specific questions that relate to Kitty's white paper. So one is, I'm unfamiliar with Tabjolt, which you use to load test Tableau server. Is it possible to share scripts that were used, such as in the Tableau server scalability white paper Kitty posted?
So I believe the Tabjolt tool is available on we publish a set of open source tools on GitHub. So it's www.github.com/Tableau. And under there, you'll see a list of a bunch of tools, and Tabjolt is one of those. And there's some pretty good documentation about how to get up and running. And, you know, if you have questions, Tabjolt is a very popular product that's used by a lot of our customers. So the community is a great resource to leverage. And also, we also monitor the forum posts. So if you have questions after looking through that, definitely, you know, reach out.
Okay, great. And then we have another related one. I'm just trying to find it. So looking at the Tableau server scalability white paper that Kitty posted on the forum, what hardware requirements were needed for the primary machine?
So I think I responded probably yesterday, so many people may not have had a chance to see the response I posted on the thread. But even regardless of which machine, we always recommend that you run with the minimum recommended hardware requirements. So that would be the 8-core, I think 64 megabytes of memory. You know, that's just what we've tested with and we validated against. And for kind of production workloads, we recommend those, we're running with those minimum hardware requirements. Sorry, one other thing I wanted to add is, if you don't put licensed processes on that primary machine, those cores won't actually count against your core license. So you don't need to worry about necessarily consuming core licenses just because you have, 8 cores running on that primary machine.
Okay, great. We have a question about moving to the cloud. How do we decide about the type of instances that we should use when moving to AWS Cloud?
So specifically for AWS, we've done a little bit of testing. Russell Christopher, who has a Tableau Love blog, he's actually our guru, and based on his testing, we generally recommend customers run on M4 larges or R4 larges. Those kind of give the best performance and do pretty well for most workloads. But we always encourage you, kind of similar to what Arun said, after you have the server installed, use Tabmon to monitor how the server is doing, and then you can adjust from there.
Okay, great. So here's another question. Someone asks, we need clear guidance on allocation of number of processes, for example, number of VizQLs, number of data engines, number of data servers. The server admin guide offers examples, but this person sees varying guidelines referenced in different places. And there's a few links they're given here to look at. Just wondering if there's a trusted source for gaining clear guidelines and constraints.
Yeah, I think this is one we laugh a little just because the answers we've given on the call already. It's a little bit science and a little bit art, I'd say, because it really does depend on your workload. It depends on complexity of workbooks, data sources, extracts versus live connections. There's a whole number of things that figure into tweaking those and managing those. The white papers try and give guidance. Again, the tools try and give guidance. After that, many of our customers opt to go with a support contract that brings about experts either remotely or on site to help further optimize. So really, at some point, it goes away from papers and really going to that next level of support and talking about, okay, does it make sense to bring somebody out or do some remote analysis on your workload, make some changes and do an analysis, over several months even. Just because we really do need to look at the usage patterns, look at how things are growing, how you're using data. So there really isn't, we could put out 10 more white papers and still not cover the wide range of things. So if you hit that point, again, I look into some more of our more advanced support options and consulting options to say, okay, I've done what I can with the papers, with guidance, done myself. How do we get to that next level of detail? And it's really going to be customized per customer at that point. And so going from a generic white paper that satisfies everybody, that's really the next step, is going to a really tailored solution for you.
And then moving back to an AWS question, after the installation of Tableau Server in AWS, can we downgrade the instance type to a lower instance? If we do that, what would be the effect?
I need to follow up on this, but I believe you should be able to change the instance size even once you've provisioned the virtual machine. But I do believe it triggers a restart of the virtual machine, so that might cause some downtime on Tableau Server as a result of that. Again, I should probably check my facts, but that's just kind of based on my memory.
The other thing that might happen is licensing might detect that the environment underneath has changed if you're already activated, and we might detect that it might be a completely different instance. So it's not sure yet, but you might see licensing not working after that. So proceed with caution there.
Yeah. In general, I would just, because it's pretty easy to spin up new virtual machines, like as you're going through your testing and validation in AWS, spin up a new instance, install on that, and do like a restore is a little bit safer way to go.
Yeah.
And then you can just make sure you deactivate. The trick with that is make sure you deactivate on the old VMs before you shut them down and terminate them.
Okay, then we have a set of backup kinds of questions. Can we use a backup taken from one licensed Tableau server in another Tableau server machine with different license for restoration?
Yes. So the license information is not backed up, so you should be able to do that very safely.
Okay, great. Then we have restore from backup has been failing for us due to fail to load configuration YAML error. Reading logs is hard. Is there something in the works to make it easier to read logs?
I know that that's definitely something we're looking at to do. We acknowledge that logs are difficult. It's not. Yeah, LogShark is definitely a tool that you can use today that's much easier for you to parse logs. But in terms of the actual messages that go in and the actionability of those messages, that's something we need to fix long term. But Kitty's right, LogShark is definitely a better way for you to be able to aggregate as well as parse logs.
The other thing you can try is in 10.1 we added, 10.2, we added the ability to restore with no config. It's one of the parameters that we added for the restore command. So if you don't need to restore configuration onto, actually that command, was always available. So you can try that because it sounds like maybe there is a problem with the configuration piece, but if you're okay with just restoring the data, you can do a restore without configuration.
In Tableau, can we use Active Directory and also external accounts or service ID for other services when using SAML? It seems that they're unable to use service ID. Can we configure a native user ID and password for these external applications when using SAML?
So we have Zishan on the call, and he is our authentication SAML expert. Zishan, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yes. So, so if I understand the question correctly, it's asking that if we can have, apart from AD, if we can have other user stores be used with SAML. So the thing is that we have site SAML support, but today it's only supported with local user store. So if you do that, then on the other side, you could have users imported from different user stores that are external to your system. But built into Tableau, we don't have right now ability to use different user stores where you'll have AD and potentially other user stores as well. This is something on our backlog for future, but currently it's not supported.
Okay, great, thank you. Then we've got some published data source questions. Any improvements with the scalability of solutions around published data sources and where published data sources are used?
So our team is not the team that's directly working on this, but I am aware of effort within the company to improve the performance of published data sources. And so I believe that work is ongoing, and you should, and it's something we're working on.
Okay, we can check on an answer for that. I'll tag that one. Okay, so here's a question. We bought an 8-core license for Tableau. Can we use the license for non-production? How many instances of non-production can we use?
So I can take that one. So the same license can be used on one production and two non-production instances. And that is definitely something that is allowed as part of our licensing. So one production and two non-production systems is the answer.
Okay, I captured that one. Okay, so here's another question. I know 3 server instances are available with server licensing. Do you see customers using more than the single production server? Given how dashboard, dev, and prod versions can be managed with projects, I'm curious how important running multiple instances is.
So according to a user, you can use a single license with just one production system and two non-production systems that we just talked about. If there is a need for a third or a second production system in addition to the first one, then it does require buying new licenses. So I understand that the question was there might be need to have other components running because of peaks demand and things like that. The elasticity of what you're asking for is definitely something we're looking at long term to be able to spin up automatic components on demand. But today, the way for you to have multiple production system is through installing it and then using a new license key.
So my interpretation of that question was that, you know, you're managing kind of having pod stage and development, like different categories through projects on a single Tableau server. So you're curious what the use case for using multiple deployments of Tableau server would be. And I will say that, yes, we do see a number of customers that leverage the 2 additional licenses. Some of them use it for actually like a hot standby environment for disaster recovery. So they do nightly restores to a second environment, and if anything goes down, they can easily swap to this hot standby environment. Another good use case for the extra kind of non-production license is just to test your testing upgrades to new versions. A lot of times, customers will use that additional license to set up a cluster that mirrors our production and validate, do a restore of that data to that environment, test the upgrade, make sure everything's functioning before they actually go to upgrade their production environment.
Thank you, Katie, for clarifying that. The third use case I would add is some customers do not let active production happen on their production system. It's a sacrosanct. And so all of the development actually happens on a completely different dev system. And then all they do is publish the certified workbooks or data sources on the production system. So that's another way that people use it.
Mm-hmm. We should also say that if in your environment it makes sense, maybe you're limited in hardware or a number of systems that you can support. If it makes sense for you to have, for example, just a production and a pre-production project or site, you know, there should really be nothing preventing you. It would just act as 2 servers. You know, you can simulate having multiple servers on one physical box with multiple sites, or if multiple projects work for you, great. You know, it really depends on what you're looking for and what your organization requires.
So here's a question. If there are changes on the permissions of a workbook, can we find out who has changed these permissions? Especially when we have multiple Tableau Server admins.
I believe you can, we do track all kind of actions like this in our audit table. So we have one of the audit tables, which we have documented, tracks this information, and you can either view the information through our admin views or connect directly to Postgres to get that information.
Is there a way to set up a proxy server in front of Tableau Server and only go to a particular site? Are you aware of any documentation about how to do this?
I'm not aware of any documentation. We certainly do support load balancers and proxy servers in front of Tableau, and we have documentation on how to set that up. and you can go to a site specifically via a URL, just putting in the right URL. So you probably could construct that. I'm not aware of any examples specifically of customers doing that or any documentation we have specifically on that.
Okay, and back to AWS again. When we downgrade, does it affect licensing and the allocation of processing?
I can take sure. So yeah, I would say it would likely affect your core. If you're on a core license, it's going to affect the cores because depending on the size of the instance, that determines how many cores are available on that particular virtual machine. So for example, I think a 4x large has 16 vCPUs, which is the equivalent of 8 cores, versus a 2x large, which has 8 vCPUs, which is equivalent to a 4-core machine. And so you do want to be careful that you pick instance sizes that actually have multiple of 8 vCPUs.
Okay, will multiple authentication methods be supported in a single Tableau server? For example, Active Directory on an internal site and SAML OpenID on another site. AD, in this case, is mostly used company-wide, and then SAML is for customers of the company.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
can
Dishan, you want to take?
Yes, as I mentioned, these scenarios are definitely on our backlog. So right now we have the site SAML support, but in future we are looking for supporting both site SAML and OpenID with localauth, and then also supporting site SAML with AD as a user store. And then further down, in the roadmap is actually supporting both multiple authentication types and user stores as well. Like LDAP support is coming, as Erwin mentioned. So that will also help us, go towards where you can have connection to different user stores, and then authentication can also be, multiple authentication types used on different sites on the same server. But right now it's site SAML only that enables you to have different IDP set up per site for external customers versus internal customers that you might have.
Okay, great. Then we have a question around scheduling. If we want to run a single subscription, which has multiple tasks in a single schedule, how should we run it? This feature is available for extract refresh, but not for subscription.
So you want to use it both for subscriptions and for extracts? So right now, schedules, we do require you to have different ones for schedules and extracts. There are some internal technical reasons why that's true. Happy to dive deep into that with you at a later date if you like. But no, we don't support mixing different task types on schedule today. I'm not sure where it is in the feature request list to do so, but I know we've heard that from several customers who are just recreating the same schedule in 2 places.
So the next set of questions is related to the Tableau server version. So first, there's a request if you could go back a slide to see the different server version functionality. And then we had a question about, someone asked what managed server secrets meant.
So managed server secrets is we are now encrypting any of the passwords or secret key information with a Java key store file when we store them in our configuration. Yeah, you can find more documentation about that in our online documentation. You should just be able to search on that feature string to get more information about it.
Okay, and then we have a question, is the ability to put an extract on hold coming soon?
Yeah, so we definitely saw a lot of saw a lot of votes for that in the forum thread post. It is, so I don't know exactly when it's coming, but it is something that we've heard a lot from customers, so we're trying to prioritize that feature on the scheduling team.
And then here's a Linux question. Tableau Server on Linux is in alpha testing, so thanks for the plug there.
Yep.
Do you expect better performance on Linux compared with the same configuration under Windows?
We're just starting perf testing now. Initial results show they're both about on par, and that's with no optimizations or no real digging in. So right now I'm going to say, our goal is equivalent, and if we get better, great. We'll keep looking for ways to optimize. Initial testing also showed memory is more available on Linux. That's going to be the big difference. Is Windows as an operating system just uses more memory than Linux does. So in terms of pure speed, we haven't seen a big difference, but we've seen that Linux, can certainly handle more sessions and things like that before all the memory gets used up, just because there's more available. So it's very early testing where we have a lot more to do, and we'll be updating, providing updated white papers on scalability, performance, all that as we get closer to release. It's still a little early for that. We are still in active development on it, still doing optimization work and whatnot.
Okay, great. Then we have a question about high availability. When the Tableau server is configured for high availability, is it switching automatically to primary and backup primary when there is a failure?
So that is not an automatic process. You will need to manually fail over the backup to the backup primary. But we have other kind of high availability features. Everything actually except for the switching over the primary is automated. So for example, if a process goes down, we'll automatically restart that process. If we detect that Postgres is down and you have a passive repository set up, we will detect that and automatically switch over to use the passive repository as active. And then when the previous active repository comes up, it'll come up as a passive. So we do have a lot of HA built in that is automated, but the one specifically that was asked about is not.
Yeah, just to clarify, what some of our customers do is actually run a pretty lean primary because of that. There's a couple things that we require to be on the primary, like our licensing server and things like that, which typically, rarely, if ever, go down. So many of our customers will have like a 2 or 3 node setup where most of the services are on workers. So if there's a problem, they do automatically fail over and leave the primary pretty small. So in case it does go down, A, you can do that manual process pretty quickly, but B, you don't lose a whole lot. It's just basically flipping over so your licenses are back in place and a couple other internal things.
One thing I'll add on to that is today when the licensing server goes down, there's not a lot of notification that it's happened, and so it's definitely a big pain point. So as part of TSM, there will be a way that you can actually see the status as well as a notification if something were to happen. We're also trying to make the whole switching to backup primary less painful for customers. So with TSM, you should see some improvements. It's a little early to say what exactly those improvements are, so we'll publish them as we come close. But betas, you might also be able to try some of those features that we're adding in. But yeah, we totally hear you that the backup primary and the primary is not as well thought out as it should be.
So then we have a somewhat related question. Have you tested using less than minimum recommendations for a primary node? And then the question goes on to say, isn't using 8-core, 64-gig RAM machine for that purpose a waste of hardware, regardless of licensing?
Yeah, so all of our machines need to meet the absolute minimum spec for Tableau Server and minimum recommended. It really depends on what you're running on that primary. When I talk about running a minimal gateway or a minimal primary machine, it's really disabling just about everything, sometimes leaving just a gateway running, but really disabling all of QL, all application servers, things like that on that machine. If you have the ability to do so, as I said, we've got, I know we have customers who choose to do that. You do still need room on that machine though, because operations such as backup, restore, zip logs, really any operation you run would be run on that primary machine. So you do want to make sure, for example, you have a hard drive big enough to take backups and do restores, restore logs, things like that. But it's not uncommon for me to see I've got a 8-core 16 gig RAM machine for my primary, running just a gateway process, and then my worker machines are 16-core, 64 gig machines, or 32-core, some ungodly amount of memory, depending on what your load is and what you need out of those other machines. So it is a setup we see that some customers do. And then there are licensing implications in a good way that a lot of there's only certain processes which count towards license. So you could have a gateway running that doesn't have any processes that need a license, need license usage. If you're just running gateway, I believe we don't use licenses for that. So it doesn't cost you anything to do for licenses. It's more if you have the hardware available to do it and want to manage having that node.
And then back to the feature slide, we have a question about the purpose of the CloudFormation template. What is the purpose of those templates?
Those templates are really meant for to be a sample of how you would deploy Tableau Server to AWS, and also for folks that just want to get up and running really quick with a trial version of the server. You can just kind of fill in a bunch of parameters, fire off the CloudFormation script, wait, half an hour to an hour, depending on if you're installing a single node or a cluster, and you kind of have that running. You can play around with Tableau Server and AWS. But yeah, if you want to use it for your own deployment, we expect that you might want to do some customization on it. So it's really just for kind of getting you started.
Just to add to that, both the automated scripts as well as the cloud templates are on GitHub, and there's a lot of really great documentation on how to use those if people are interested.
Great. And then we have, this sounds more like a comment. In the future, would it be possible to have a UI interface for Tableau Server where it would help the admin monitor viz server, data server, app server, etc., which would basically help the users understand if there are any potential issues? With the current view, it's difficult to monitor log files and take action.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for the comment. We are continuing to look into ways to provide better information about what server is doing, the status of server, status of workloads, things like that. Some of the open source tools we've talked about, like Tableau, are starting in that direction. Mostly they're targeted at system admins still, not individual users who, in most cases, those individual users don't have the ability to or knowledge to, hey, I need to deal with processes and things like that. So most of this is targeted at admins at the moment. We also do have more coming down the pike in terms of data source management, workbook management, things like that. Most of that's going to be on a different team when we're talking that level of monitoring. But I think there's plans across the board, really enabling more and more. You've probably heard us talk about enabling self-service, and it's all more towards that of giving customers the ability to solve their own problems, or giving individual users the ability to solve their own problems, like, hey, your extract failed because of a password problem or whatnot. So. Yeah, but no, thank you for the feedback. We'll take that.
So here's a question around, it sounds like permissions. So for delegated administrators or site administrators, is there any extension planned to provide, for example, a project leader the rights for user management or add a user to a group?
That should be available today. As a system admin, when you're creating a site, there should be a setting which determines whether or not site admins can add and remove users. I'd have to double check on groups. It's been a while since I've looked into that.
So I can add. I think the question here is that providing a new role for of a project leader, which has permissions to add or remove users or update permissions in that group. So that is on the roadmap. It's not supported today.
Okay, and then we have just a couple of other questions and just a quick time check. We've got about 5 more minutes or so for questions. If you get those in, we will try to answer them live. And if we don't, we will follow up after this call. In Tableau, we noticed that temp files are occupying more space in a period of time. Do they need to be deleted manually using Tab Admin cleanup, or is there some other way that these temp files could be cleared automatically?
We do clear them periodically as part of this internal cleanup process. If they are becoming a problem, you can run cleanup and to force that to happen. But we do clean them up periodically on our own.
Okay, great. And then, can I give a user the ability to create an account in Tableau Server without having site or server admin privileges? Can I give a user the ability to create an account in Tableau Server without giving them site or server admin privileges?
Okay, I understand your question. Not directly. So from the sounds of it, it's sounding like you want a general purpose form where anybody can just sign up automatically and have themselves suddenly have an account on the server. So there's not a way built into Tableau Server to do that. I know using some of our APIs, customers have constructed custom portals that allow that. To be able to add a user today, you do need to be a site admin or a server admin. So what I've seen is customers create their own form, and then using our APIs, from your little web app or from their little web app, then call Tableau Server with using an account of the correct permissions. So really like a self-sign-up form where there might be some fields for enter your name, enter your username, enter a site name that you'd like, and then they've got another little script or something that runs that actually does that in the background. So it is not built in directly today. You can do that on your own with our APIs, as I said. And then if you're interested in having that built in, I'd say we'll take that feedback and also file an idea in the ideas forum, and that's also a good way to give us ideas for new features. So yeah, it's possible today, not directly, but it is possible to do, and I know we do have customers doing it with a little bit of custom work.
Then we've got a question: how can we increase the performance in live extracts and dashboards without increasing backgrounders?
Increase the performance of extracts. So it kind of depends on what you mean by increase the performance. If you mean the speed at which the extract forms or query performance on top of the extract, those are different things. Once you have the extract, increasing performance, again, I point back to those tools or the answer before of getting somebody to come out and look at your extracts and complexity to determine where the slowdown is. If things are slow, our suggestion might be more hardware. Our suggestion might be some changes to your data source or how you're doing your queries. There's a number of different things that could potentially increase visualization time on top of the extract, and then taking the extract as well. If you've got a lot of complex queries, things like that, it could take a while. There's any number of things. We'd have to dig into your situation specifically. Again, I point you to those tools, or if that's not doing it, some of our more advanced consulting or debugging options would be the way to go.
And then we have just a couple minutes left. Getting to the last few questions, someone asks about, do we have any plans for exposing an interface for governance of data sources, stale reports, failed exports? So this person would love to expose that information for users. Your data source failed, for example. Yep. Is there something in the works with respect to that kind of user interface?
Yeah, so again, that's not specifically our team, but I can tell you we've got a team here working on data management and enhancing that. I would point back, if you're able, go check out some of our coverage of Tableau Conference 2016 from last year, particularly during the keynote. we demonstrated some of our thoughts on where we want to take data governance and really enhancing discoverability of data sources management, creating certified data sources, just really diving in deep to the data server and data management part of Tableau Server. And then say, further questions we should follow up specifically with the data management team. But Tableau Conference had a lot of great information, a lot of great previews last year, and I know those videos are available online to please give you a flavor of what we're looking at.
In the previous versions of Tableau, before 10, when we configure high availability server setup, they set up a primary and a backup primary. We used to copy the configuration file, but in the new version, we have a recommendation to copy the whole folder. What's the big change when comparing 10.x to previous versions?
I can take that one. In addition to just the configuration files, one of the things I mentioned is for managed server secrets, we have a Java key store file that is needed to help us decrypt the configuration. So that's part of that folder. And I think there may be some web data connector information that also needs to get copied over. So there's just more information that needs to be copied over because we added new features.
Great. So I think we're just about at time. There's only 3 questions that need to be answered later. We'll get to those and get back to you. We'll make sure to capture those questions. And any final comments? We want to thank you all for joining us for this hour. This has just been fantastic. If you like this session, we can set up more of these kinds of hosted Q&A sessions with the product team.
Thank you all. I appreciate all the questions, all the comments and feedback. We really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, just kind of echoing Aruna. We love the engagement from the community. We love having an opportunity to answer your questions and kind of connect with the server admins. So thank you all for coming today.
And we'll keep the thread going for, it doesn't have to stop for this week. So we'll keep an eye on the questions and feedback there, and we'll do our best to respond back to you.
And again, thank you. And I'm just going to plug our alphas one more time. Both for, we've got a Windows server with TSM, which is our new administrative interface, as well as a Linux alpha going. If you're interested in those, please sign up. It's early on their alpha level, so there's things that aren't working, but it would provide us great feedback even at this early stage if you're able to hop on them. So thank you.
Thank you.